What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It's Wednesday, December 18th. We are live, of course, so welcome to everybody tuning in. Drop your questions. I know that it is the fantasy season and fantasy playoff season, and some of you may have been knocked out. Let me know how you did. Are you still in it? Are you knocked out? Do you want to chat? Start sit questions, rest of season questions, commiserating questions, questions for 2025, all that good stuff. Let's go. Anything and everything is on the table within reason, of course. But today's topic is actually going to be playoff running backs. And I feel like this is a good topic just moving forward in general, because some of these running backs have fantasy implications, not for only the remainder of this season, but kind of interesting situations for 2025 and beyond. So we're going to have some good names that we discuss here. And of course, I'm going to answer your questions. Before I dive into that main topic, though, I did want to start us off with the news of the hour, of course. Kirk Cousins officially benched. Jameis Winston also benched. That's less dramatic, just more irritating because of the way that it knocks out our wonderful Jerry Jeudy, who has just been thriving. Jerry Jeudy, who has been thriving with Jameis Winston at quarterback, now getting Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Oh my gosh, it's misery. It pains me. I mean, hopefully, maybe we'll give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt, like a smidge benefit of the doubt here. Because hey, anything can happen. Maybe the guy developed, he's young, so things can change. But it just makes everything so shaky for our pass catchers there, unfortunately. But Kirk Cousins, that information right there, that change, that benching, the switch to Michael Penix Jr., that is intriguing, right? Because one, at least he gets a good matchup, Penix does, that we're now moving into. And you might find it curious, right? Because technically speaking, the Falcons are still in the playoff hunt. Anything can happen, and their schedule it's interesting coming up. I feel like people kind of look at Washington because that's the next matchup and see it as a layup matchup, and I don't really think that's the case. You can throw on them, but really, they've just generally speaking not been an absolute layup defense. So I really wouldn't look at them that way. But rest of season schedule, it's not all that bad for Penix. So him getting in there with the weapons that he has. The Atlanta receiving core. Shout out to the Atlanta receiving core. We knew what Drake London was heading into the season. I knew what Darnell Mooney was heading into the season, but a lot of people didn't. If you weren't a Darnell Mooney truther, you really didn't think that it was going to really amount to much there in Atlanta. But him getting out of Chicago into an environment that he can finally thrive in, even for as dreadful as Kirk Cousins has been, not just from a fantasy perspective, but overall in real football as well. At the very least, he has been able to supply a steady stream of volume to these receivers, and Darnell Mooney has been a big beneficiary. Also, Ray McLeod, shout out to my boy there, Clemson alum, really shining there as the wide receiver 3. Kyle Pitts, nothing for you on that one, but overall, this is a fantastic receiving core that Penix is being gifted right here. In a competent offense, decent offensive line, there are really truly no major issues that he's stepping into. This is just a perfect opportunity for him to come in late season with a decent end of season schedule. Obviously, the Giants, good matchup here. Washington, we just talked about. And then for our purposes, we don't get this, but Carolina in week 18 as well. Excellent matchup here. So really get a nice, good preview for 2025 of what to expect for Penix moving forwards here. So I'm excited about it. And for all we know, he could push this team into the playoffs. We don't know, like it's possible as well. So this will be interesting to watch rest of season here. So this is definitely the one that I am most excited for on Sunday. I will be glued to this to see how he does because of the massive fantasy implications that it'll have for us in 2025 and the off season here. By the way, guys, drop your questions. Let's see. Let's go ahead and answer some before we head into the topic, because the running back that I wanted to start us off with, just because we were just talking about Jameis Winston and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who I'm just going to say DTR because it's so much easier on that one. I did want to start us off with Jerome Ford, but a lot of you were dropping questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive into some of those. And one that was dropped on YouTube early Thank you. Need to start two of these three: Brees Hall, Chuba Hubbard, or Isaac Garindo. You know, two of these guys have some interesting situations. I'm not concerned about the Brees Hall and the whole, practicing and potentially playing through an injury here. That's the least of my concerns here. My concerns for Brees Hall remain around the fact that he is straight up just not getting the volume here. And we've seen enough of additional support from Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis in the backfield, just kind of adding enough to just really take away from him to where we've got no volume at all that we are working with Brees Hall. So it makes him very touchdown dependent here, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And when we're looking at Isaac Garindo, not the same situation here. He is playing through an injury, but this new injury that popped up for him today, I think popped up on the practice report, apparently a hamstring. So that's completely different than what we were dealing with previously. Previously was the knee, I believe, and the injury that he has now is a hamstring injury that he got in the last game. So this is new. This is something we have to monitor. Hamstrings make us uncomfortable here. And that also adds in the added risk of if you're dealing with a hamstring injury and we've got a running back that is playing through this injury, potentially has to get pulled during the game. So that's worrisome for me. Chuba Hubbard is just the straightforward, easiest one to go with here. Last week was underwhelming for him for sure, but volume is king for Chuba Hubbard. He has no competition on that end, unfortunately, there for everyone else. But for him, the matchup with Arizona isn't that bad. He's healthy. He's got the backfield to himself. He's got guaranteed volume. It should be a very different situation than last week where it was just that flat out was just not a good matchup for him, unfortunately. So the fact that we got at least a decentish floor out of him in a not so wonderful matchup against a Dallas defense that has pulled itself together more recently as an RB3. I'm encouraged by it. I'm not worried about it. There's no panic around this. So him against Arizona, feeling more confident that he'll return to that borderline RB1 level. So I would go with Chuba Hubbard there for sure. Downs or McMillan. And yeah, and guys, if you're watching on TikTok or on anywhere else, it's not a straight start sit. It's a podcast. So I do got to do a little explanation because I'm here for an hour and I do not want to give the podcast audience a straight hour of yes and no names because that's not a fun show here. But drop your questions and I'll continue to get to them. But appreciate you tuning in. Jonathan Taylor or Bucky. Bucky always does better, but JT projected more. And he's projected more because it's Jonathan Taylor, right? And technically speaking, last week, if he had got that touchdown, it would have been a lot better from a fantasy perspective. But Bucky Irving is still the one that I trust more. Last week's production, not fabulous. But at the same time, volume is still on his side. He was highly productive in terms of actual yardage. Just didn't really turn out from a fantasy perspective well because he didn't get the touchdown. So, yeah, Rachaad White kind of does put a little bit of a thorn on his side right there. But when he's healthy, and he is questionable right now, but I would expect him to, play again this week. So when he's healthy, it's Bucky Irving that we want to go with. He's got the easy top 10 potential and just the all-around better offense for sure. Jonathan Taylor just genuinely makes me uncomfortable this year. I'm so sorry. I actually think this is going to be a Anthony Richardson week, just FYI. Streaming option, decent, but especially in DFS, that's someone that I'm looking at. Kendre Miller, Ramondre Stevenson, or Jalen McMillan. So if Kamara is out, it is Kendre for sure on that one. I love the matchup against Green Bay. I'm a Green Bay fan. But even I can admit that you want to target the running backs against us. It's just what you want to do. Pick 2, Terry McLaurin, Jerome Ford, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jalen McMillan, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Downs. I go with Terry, and I understand the matchup, right? The matchup definitely does make people feel a little bit uncomfortable here because if we look back, often and I did this with Chicago and Minnesota last week. For the most part, it kind of turned out to be the same situation. Justin Jefferson performing was the only other anomaly. But when we have these matchups in a recent enough time frame, we can always go back to them and look and say, this is what I expect from a fantasy perspective. So if you're doing that with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, you get a little bit worried, right? Because of this Philadelphia matchup, they just didn't perform very well in the matchup from a fantasy perspective before. But Terry McLaurin has been on fire. And you got to remember in that matchup, Jaden Daniels was dealing with that rib injury. It was bothering him a little bit. He's clearly healthy now. Things are clicking on all cylinders. Terry McLaurin is the only dude out there that can actually catch the ball, unfortunately. Zach Ertz dealing with an injury too, which I hate because that's one of my favorite tight end streaming options. So Terry is the easy one right there. And then when you're talking about the other two, it does get a little bit shakier. Ramondre Stevenson has an excellent matchup, but the lack of volume and inconsistency just makes me a little bit uncomfortable with him. I kind of lean towards Jerome Ford, and let me explain why. And this kind of dovetails perfectly into the topic of the podcast, which was these playoff running backs. Who are we trusting? Who are we not trusting? So let's talk about Jerome Ford here for a second before we go back to the start-sit questions here. When we're looking at Jerome Ford stepping into Nick Chubb out for the season, Ford should be stepping into a lead back role. I would expect the production to be different from what we saw from him earlier in the season, because earlier this season, Cleveland was weird. I'm not entirely sure what Kevin Stefanski was doing in terms of putting him, splitting carries with Donta Foreman. We've got Pierre Strong there as well. So earlier in the season, Jerome Ford, when he was theoretically the lead back when Chubb was out, he wasn't really operating as a lead back because Stefanski was doing some strange things. But the fact that as we got Nick Chubb back, we had a complete phase out essentially of Donta Foreman, right? The only other active running back was Pierre Strong, and he was very seldom used, only touched the ball just literally a couple of times there. So this lead back role should theoretically all volume go to Jerome Ford. And Nick Chubb had been underwhelming in terms of volume, but touchdown opportunities have been there for him. And what really kind of hurt Nick Chubb in the context of that Cleveland offense is the fact that he does not have receiving upside, which is a major issue with him. Jerome Ford has excellent receiving upside. He's used a lot in checkdowns, so it's reasonable to expect a good 4 all the way up to maybe 7 receptions for him. If you're looking at props, maybe that's one that you could look at as well. But Jerome Ford, in the opportunity he has within this offense, and a good matchup here as well with the Bengals having one of the most generous defenses all around in the league. Jerome Ford is a clear, easy, low-end RB2 for me with really good upside because of his pass catching ability in PPR. The only issue that I have here, obviously, is with DTR starting, which is frustrating. With DTR starting, we might not expect as many goal line opportunities because I wouldn't expect the offense to flow as well when Jameis was at the helm. For all his interceptions, he can at least provide goal line opportunities and volume there. But at the end of the day, Cincinnati's defense across the board, we just target. And that's not to speak, like from a fantasy perspective, I still like Cincinnati's defense this week. But on the opposite end, from a running back perspective, Jerome Ford has a lot of upside in this matchup. So Jerome Ford is the other one that I really, really do like this week. Taking other questions here. With David Montgomery out, can I start Ramondre against Buffalo confidently? Yes, and I just, for comparison on that last question, I did choose Terry McLaurin and Jerome Ford, but Ramondre Stevenson is right there with Jerome Ford. They're very interchangeable for me. Ramondre just doesn't have that guaranteed volume because of that little bit that they're providing. Like, it's just enough to make it very irritating, even in a good matchup with Antonio Gibson. But the Buffalo matchup is just so good for running backs. I trust it. I trust them at the very least to get a low end RB2. So I'm okay with rolling with Ramondre Stevenson this week. Pick 3, Bucky, JT, Connor, Achan. Connor for sure, and Achan. We've got excellent choices there at running back. We're just going to nix Bucky out because of the genuine just playing through injuries there. And then JT, just because of the ceiling being a wee bit of an issue for him. So it's Connor and Achan that are my preferences. Which two receivers should I start? DK, Ladd, JMO, or Worthy? Oh my God, you're testing me on this one because one, Ladd has a terrible matchup at the same time. And we have seen this matchup before and it was underwhelming production, right? Now, granted, he has developed more as a rookie, but I'm not expecting a ton out of that LA Chargers offense as a whole, unfortunately. Makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So when we're looking at DK, Ladd, JMO, and Worthy, technically speaking, I do lean towards DK and Jameson. Lad is awesome, but the matchup just makes me so uncomfortable. I trust Denver's defense more than any defense in the league, period. So, despite the fact that DK has been so underwhelming, I do like the matchup. So it's DK, and take your shot there with Jameson. What's up, Terrell? Terrell T asks how my teams are doing. My teams are doing good, oddly enough. Oddly, like, then this is very weird. My two best teams in the playoffs right now that I think are not locks to win the championship, because anything can happen this week, but are heavily favored, are my Christian McCaffrey teams. So I never get the 101. And for some reason, I got the 101 in 2 leagues this year, and I took it, and which, worked out fine, because if I didn't draft Christian McCaffrey, it was going to be Tyreek Hill. So ultimately it didn't really matter. But both of my Christian McCaffrey teams are kind of dominating right now. I don't get it. One is interesting because I didn't play the waivers at all. It's straight up the teams that I drafted. It's been saved by Chase Brown. We'll talk about Chase Brown in a little bit. But Chase Brown, our hero RB right there, has really pulled through from mid round to late round drafting. Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. That is what's been carrying me through the season. So might get a championship in that one. It's looking very promising. And then another one I think I'm going to lose this week, but I feel okay about it. But yeah, oddly enough, my two Christian McCaffrey teams feel like they're locks for going to the championship and winning this week. And then I've got another one that I don't feel super confident about. And then I've got I've got some best ball teams, but I got one that is really promising with the combination of Josh Jacobs and my Josh Jacobs and Josh Allen team. But I'm crossing my fingers is going to carry me through and win me some big money there. So yeah, feeling good about that. I love best ball. We're going to do a lot of best ball content in the off season on this podcast, and then on my general social media channels as well, because with best ball specifically, this is very odd. My preference and thing that I love more than anything is pre-draft best ball. That is my jam. My pre-draft best ball on Underdog. I'm not sponsored by them, so this is just what I enjoy playing. I'm gonna beat my pre-draft best ball on Underdog. That is absolutely my favorite, just because you can take so many chances and stabs. Like, that's how we ended up with like 80% J.K. Dobbins, which actually, worked out very well, because you can make those predictions in free agency and try and guess where people are going and make the pre-draft and draft, make your draft picks and assume where people are going in terms of different teams and starting positions and who's a rookie that could pop in a good environment. So that's my favorite thing to do. We'll do a ton of that content during the off season because it brings me joy. And I think I'm pretty good at it. So we'll talk about that. But YouTube guys, actually, we are going to take a little commercial break for you guys watching over here. And on the podcast, of course. And we will hear a word from our sponsors.
Oh, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on playerprofiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Greminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The Dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com. Use promo code PODFATHER. Get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy!
All right, and we are back. I was in the middle of answering a question because my TikTok audience, they don't go to commercial break over there because I've got it 2 separate setups. But I was answering the question about Jaden Daniels, and someone has Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert. Is it time to start someone else over Jaden Daniels? Again, on that one, Matchup, not ideal, right? We've seen it before, but again, with that one, I do feel like he's going to put out a better fantasy output on this one. He's still a top 10 quarterback for me. I have him ranked higher than Knicks, Mahomes, and Herbert for sure. Mahomes and Herbert easily. The only one I would put some thought to there is Knicks, because I do like this for a bounce back game, potentially for him, but mainly for Sutton. But I would still go with Jane Daniels. Start 2, Sutton, Neighbors, Wilson. That one is tough because I love all of those guys. I would go with Sutton for sure. And then it's close between Neighbors and Wilson, but I would go with Neighbors. Wilson, I trust the volume and I like the matchup. And I think Aaron is going to potentially go out there and kill it this week. One, because you know how he is. I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you haven't, he's obviously in this entire argument with Ryan Clark. And when he is fired up and feeling antagonistic, that's when he goes out and actually shows off. So I anticipate a decent performance from Aaron Rodgers this week. So I love all of those guys, but it's Sutton and Neighbors that I would go with, just because volume, I think, is going to be stupid high for Neighbors this week. Jerry Judy, and thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Jerry Judy, Devonta Smith, Thielen, Bateman, pick one. I would just go ahead and go with Devonta Smith on that one. I love Jerry Judy. If it was Jameis, it would be Jerry Judy, no question for me. And this is like, y'all will hear me moan and groan over this week with my frustrations of the fact that they benched Jameis. I understand it's frustrating from a game perspective, but they know DTR is not their future. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but it's not my favorite. But Devonta Smith is definitely the safest option to go with there. Pick one. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Got distracted on the comments there. Hi, Charlene. I wanted to say hi to you. Appreciate you joining in. And with the comment of the Browns falling apart and it being time to start Penix, and you have London and Mooney. Yeah, if you've got, I think London and Mooney are safe this week. I've got Mooney in multiple leagues. I'm rolling them out, no question. I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing Penix play and what he can do in this offense for sure. Yeah, and you've got Cup and can't afford another zero. I will say, and I'm not telling you to start him, but I will say, especially not over Drake London for sure. But I do think that there is a potential for a bounce. For a bounce back this week. And the reasoning for that is that this is not a bad defensive matchup. The Jets defense has been essentially reeling and providing good volume ever since they fired Robert Saleh. So when I'm looking at this matchup, I mean, low-key, I just talked about Aaron Rodgers. I feel like this is one of those ones that could go off on both sides. Point total's good, so I like that. It's one of the highest of the week. So I'm all for Matt Stafford is a bounce back candidate this week. Puka Nacua always. We don't ever fade. Puka, a Cooper Cup bounce back here, and then I still feel solid on the Jets side of things. The only person that I'm concerned with, unfortunately, is Breece Hall on that one. Flex, Aaron Jones or Bucky Irving. Provided that he's healthy, it is Bucky Irving on that one. Thank you for the gifts, Tyson. Pick three between Terry McLaurin, Adam Thielen, Josh Downs, Jalen McMillan, Rashad Bateman, Kendre Miller. Oh, this one is tough because you got the injury contention. I wasn't coughing all day, and all of a sudden, I must have ate something weird. On that one, you've got the injury issue potentially there with Alvin Kamara making Kendre essentially a strong RB2 play and a good matchup there. So we'll answer this two ways. If Alvin Kamara is out, this one is an easy McLaurin, Thielen for the bounce back here, and then Kendre Miller. If he is not, obviously we would not be going with Kendre Miller, and it would be Terry Thielen. And then like the ceiling and floor juxtaposition between Bateman makes me uncomfortable. I don't know if I trust it to go back to back. I kind of lean towards Jalen McMillan on this one. Josh Downs is intriguing, but I'm liking the progression from Jalen McMillan and the potential for volume for Baker this week. Very intriguing. So McMillan is probably the third option that I would go with if Miller doesn't have the starting job. Goff or Jaden? I lean towards Jaden on that one, and Goff again is a very safe option, and beyond safe, his ceiling is extremely high when those touchdowns come in. But I still have Jaden higher on that one. Scrolling up for some ones that I missed. So Mahomes is playing since he practiced in full. Yeah, we don't know for sure, and because of like weird fantasy football things, he's probably going to be continue to talk about it from an injury perspective and potentially questionable, but it seems like he's on track to play. And so I wouldn't worry about it. I've already pushed him up into the rankings into a normal position here. So I'm assuming that Mahomes does play this week. How is Smitty safer than Thielen as the wide receiver one? Not necessarily safer. And when I'm looking at Devontae Smith, I wouldn't say that he is a safer option than Adam Thielen, but I like the potential for volume for Philadelphia this week. Again, it's a weird one where I do feel like they could just lean on Saquon Barkley, so it does make it a little bit uncomfortable here and is risky. But it's just the more stable team situation, the higher volume situation, and then the better quarterback. Thielen, I do like for a bounce back week, so it's not nothing negative about Thielen. I do attribute Thielen's poor performance last week to just Dallas. Again, the defense has been coming around for everything that they have struggled through this year. The defense is really turning things around. And when we're looking at this matchup with Arizona, it's better. Arizona is not a layup by any means, but it is a better matchup than Dallas. So I do like this as a bounce back, but Devontae is higher for me. Rico or Kendre if AK is out, and do I play AK if he plays? Yeah, if he's active, even if it's a game time decision, I cannot sit him. Again, the quarterback situation is extremely frustrating for sure. And granted, the bulk of, that big play that he got, the big reception there, that pass was from Cedric Wilson. So maybe if they love us, they give Cedric Wilson a couple of passes there because that was fire and it worked, and I would like to see it again. But yeah, there's no scenario where I can sit Alvin Kamara just because of the upside of him as a player. But between Rico and Kendre, if Alvin Kamara is out, I do still lean Rico. The volume is there. I like the matchup here, and I lean Rico by a smidge, but it would be very close. Aaron Jones or Isaac Guerrero, I would go with Aaron Jones over Isaac Guerrero. Broncos or Arizona. Broncos defense for sure. I do like Arizona's defense this week, so nothing negative against them. Arizona is my let's look. 6. They're my 6 overall defense this week. But Denver is at 5 for me. And quite frankly, they could be higher theoretically, but there's really good matchups in terms of interception generating quarterbacks that you have to place above them. But Denver is just such a solid one for me that I cannot look past for sure. Madison or Rico? Rico for sure. I've got concerns about Alexander Madison. I'm actually writing an article, and this evening, it'll be out tomorrow, and I'm going to talk about Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah, because instinct makes you say, okay, Sincere McCormick out, they're going to go back to Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison just simply does not have a ceiling in any way, shape, or form there. So we're in the fantasy playoffs. We're not looking to play it safe here. If you're in full PPR, low-key, I think that Amir Abdullah is probably the better route to go than Alexander Madison. Don't shoot me for that one, but that's kind of the theoretical, the short of it in terms of what I'm going to write about. If we're looking for upside, I don't think that you want to go the Madison direction at all. Full PPR, Rachaad White or Bucky. I would still go with Bucky. Rachaad White had the better fantasy performance, right? But we do have to remember that Bucky was playing through an injury. So hopefully one more week removed, it'll be a better situation for him. And really right there, it just kind of depends on who gets the touchdowns. Typically speaking, Bucky was the better bet for it. Rachaad is still fully in play there, but Bucky is the one that I prefer for sure. Thoughts on Dowdle this week? That is perfect because Rico Dowdle is one of the guys that Rico Dowdle is one of the guys that I wanted to talk about as well as kind of the main topics on the podcast here. So looking at Rico Dowdle this week is very interesting, just because I feel like Rico has gotten to that point where he's not a must start, but he's in a territory where you have to have a really good argument to sit him. Him being the official RB1 here, the volume that he has had has been amazing, right? In week 15, we saw him with a career high 25 carries, season high 25 carries, 149 yards on the ground. And it was a weird game because he wasn't actually targeted in the passing game. And typically he does have a little bit of that upside. So when you combine that with no touchdown, it just kind of made for a weird fantasy lack of upside situation. But I kind of consider that more of an anomaly. When I'm looking at the guaranteed volume that he has, in a matchup where I feel like there's going to be a stronger amount of goal line opportunities. The Cowboys, Cooper Rush has been performing well enough to be able to push the ball on this Buccaneers defense. Obviously, the Bucs have such a strong offense that even though the Cowboys defense has been performing at a higher level, they'll be able to take advantage of it as well. So I like this back and forth here, potentially some good goal line opportunities for Rico Dowdle, the guarantee of volume here for him as well. When I'm looking at Rico Dowdle, I just can't make an argument against him this week. And moving forward as well, it's very interesting because he is incredibly incentivized. We got to remember he is on a 1-year contract, right? And the only problem that I have is next week faces the Eagles. That's obviously like just a general time where we're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable and push him down into that low end RB2 territory. But I still think the volume will be there enough for him. But looking at him and his potential future here, I don't know that Dallas is going to re-sign him, and we don't know what we don't know what Jerry Jones will do, and it sounds like they're not going to be doing a lot. Jerry Jones's son came out and said, kind of expect the same in terms of them not doing a whole lot, which is very interesting. But they spent all that money on Dak and CD, so I feel like it's a little bit anticipated here. But Rico is playing for a contract because what he has shown is that he can go and he can get that kind of that little sweetheart deal, where you're getting about less than 10, right? But the pay for running backs is increasing a little bit now that they've become such a focal point and really had a strong bounce back season here. But he can go and get a little nice contract somewhere in a potential committee or a potential lead back role in a team looking to save a little money here. So this is a big moment for Rico. And this game right here in particular is one where I feel super, super comfortable with. So Rico for sure on that one. Darnold or Nix. We got to go with Darnold. And I hate that because I love Bo Nix. I do. I don't like to sit him, but at the same time, Darnold is just on fire. We can't do that. We saw this matchup before. Again, this is the NFC North is so weird. They're just repeating late season matchups very, very close together. So we've got enough recent of a sample size to understand that this is a good matchup for Darnold. He should still perform and we'll get a strong top 10 performance from him. So we're still feeling comfortable with Darnold. Aaron Jones or Alvin Kamara? We are going with Alvin Kamara on that one. Would you add Hollywood Brown? I would. That is my Hollywood Brown love coming through for him and wishing him the best because I love the potential upside for him. I would add him if he plays this week because that will at least give us a gauge, right? To be able to see how much they put him into the offense. Because if he does not play this week and then he is activated in week 17, I would not feel comfortable with starting him just because of the fact that we've seen how they've been slow rolling the volume with Isaiah Pacheco and still splitting with Kareem Hunt. So that kind of gives you a tip off that they might limit him a little bit. So if he's active in this week, I can add him and, see and kind of gauge. And if he gets a good, decent amount of work, then maybe he's someone we could look at as a flex option in week 17. Otherwise, would feel uncomfortable here. So add if you have the bench space here. Lots of Monty and lost Monty and Kenneth Walker is injured. Is Kendre Miller going to play or is anyone else good still on waivers? I kind of lean towards, now granted, you have to be prepared. I lean towards Alvin Kamara playing. I don't know for sure, right? Just based off the fact that he said it was kind of minor. That's trusting his word, but at the same time, the Saints are not competitive right now. It's a poor quarterback situation, so it's possible that he doesn't play, and then you would be comfortable leaning on Kendre Miller. But you probably do need to get prepared for the possibility of him coming back. It's just like a weird situation where we don't know for sure. If he does come back, and I kind of talked about this one in a second, you're probably not able to grab Jerome Ford off waivers unless your league. Now, granted, we're in the semifinals, so maybe, people are super active in terms of people that are playing in the losers bracket, maybe not. But if you are able to grab a Jerome Ford, 100%. If not, you're going to have to get a little creative here. It's possible that if you've got maybe Tajay Spears on waivers, that's a direction that you could turn to. Spears, I do anticipate Tony Pollard playing this week, but he is dealing with an ankle injury. It's something that he picked up during last week's game. So this is a new injury, not the one that he was not practicing with potentially new or re-aggravated. I actually don't have the information on that right now. So let me not say that it's a new injury. It could just be re-aggravated from what he was dealing with there. But Spears would be the main one that I would try to target if he's available. And if you can't go that direction, again, I don't feel comfortable with Alexander Madison. I just straight up would not go that direction. Volume might be there, but I can't trust it. I would much rather turn to, and I hate to say this, I would turn to Amir Abdullah over him, but I wouldn't just try your best to avoid that situation if you have to, but that's probably the route that I would go. It's not happy, but it is what it is. I want to answer this one here. Do we downgrade Seattle receivers with Geno possibly out? So Geno actually practiced today. So we're looking like it's maybe not a major issue and that we could get Geno this week. So at least we're feeling positive about that. So for right now, hold where you are on your Seattle receivers. Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas in half PPR. It's super close between the two of them, but I still lean Neighbors over Brian Thomas. How do we feel about Drake London? I still feel good about it. I mean, look, the thing about Penix, if we know one thing for sure, he's got a big arm, and that's the appeal that we need with Drake London and Darnell Mooney. We need a big arm that can get the ball downfield to these big playmakers here. So, yeah, Kirk Cousins was providing the volume to these guys, but I'll forego. But I don't think volume will drop, to be frank. I really don't think it's going to drop with Penix. But accuracy and just overall competency can't get that much worse. So I still feel confident with starting Drake London. Yeah, as a flex option for sure. We're still feeling confident with him. Rachaad White or Isaiah Pacheco already starting Bucky. I know it feels weird to put all your eggs in one basket, but there's worse things than you can do there's worse things that you can do than to put all of your eggs in the basket of the Bucs backfield. It produces, okay? It produces 2 top 24 backs. It's okay to start both of them. Again, Isaiah Pacheco's volume has been so shaky. So I just feel super uncomfortable with it. And yes, I would start Rachaad White over Isaiah Pacheco. If I'm shooting for the moon, I just don't know if I can trust Pacheco's volume, unfortunately, and I hate that. What are my top 5 defenses and kickers this week? My top 5 defenses this week, I have the Packers as my overall number 1 defense this week. The potential turnovers there with that New Orleans defense, or with that New Orleans offense with Desmond Ridder essentially at quarterback. I think that's the direction they're going. I don't know if they officially named it. I guess I wasn't paying attention to my Desmond Ridder news. Not a lot of needed there from a fantasy perspective, right? But the potential interceptions there. Green Bay has been on fire with the turnovers, so that's my number 1. Minnesota obviously is my number 2. That could change there if, again, it's looking like Geno is going to play there. But Minnesota's defense has been strong regardless. Buffalo versus New England, another top 5 defense there, Atlanta versus the Giants, and then rounding things out with Denver for me. And then for kickers, I mean, I keep it pretty standard on kickers. Brandon Aubrey, Fairbairn, Chase McLaughlin, Chris Boswell. I think I'm a little bit higher than consensus on Chris Boswell, and then Jack Bates are my ones. Some more questions here. Cameron Dicker or Will Reichard for kicker. It's Reichard for me that I would go with. Caleb Williams or Kyler Murray. I would go with Kyler Murray over Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb is interesting, obviously, right? Just because of, again, when we're looking at Caleb in this matchup previously, this is another one of those strong matchups for him. This was actually an excellent matchup for him and an excellent matchup for Keenan Allen, by the way. But I still lean towards Kyler Murray on this one. Good question here at Tucker Craft. At tight end, not at Tucker Craft. At tight end, Tucker Craft or Brenton Strange at tight end. I was super on Brenton Strange last week. And it's tough for me because I want to lean into Tucker Craft. I love Tucker Craft, Packers fan here. These guys are super close for me. Let me check my rankings and see how high I move Brenton Strange. They might be right next to each other. No, there's one person between them. So I've got Tucker Craft at tight end 9, Pat Freiermuth, assuming that George Pickens is going to be out, and then Brenton Strange. So yeah, he's a top 10 tight end for me, but I would still go with Tucker Craft, especially consider that they are playing New Orleans. They've been a bit of a mess. Kyler Murray or Jaden Daniels? Jaden Daniels. Terry McLaurin, JSN. Let me read that correctly. T. Higgins, JSN. Terry McLaurin, Jordan Addison at flex. It is Terry for me. My preference is always going to be Terry. I know matchup, but I'm sticking to my guns on that one. I'm not fanning him. This is an opportunity for Jaden Daniels to attack this matchup with Philadelphia, much healthier, in a better position, and hyper target Terry McLaurin. Yes, Philadelphia's defense has been fantastic. Their secondary, I mean, kudos to them, right? They have come along very, very strong here, but not fading Terry McLaurin this week. Where you got David Njoku? I don't, unfortunately, have him ranked right now because I don't anticipate him playing. Now, granted, he did return on a limited capacity, but if I were to move him up in ranking, if he was healthy, let's say he gets in a limited tomorrow and Friday and we're feeling good heading into the weekend, I would rank him at tight in 7, right above Mark Andrews, which I feel like is maybe kind of pushing it. But the quarterback situation does make it a little bit interesting there. Mark Andrews has been strong with top 10 performances recently, but they've all been with touchdowns. Volume is still a little bit shaky there. In this matchup with Pittsburgh, it's not good. He underperformed in the last matchup with Pittsburgh, so feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. So I would push David Njoku, if he's healthy, right up above Mark Andrews. Geno Smith, Bo Nix, Cooper Rush, half PPR. I like this question because I appreciate the acknowledgement of Bo Nix as a solid streaming option this week. I would still go with Bo Nix on that one. Geno, regardless, it's just a no-go with Geno, even if he's active for me, unfortunately. So it's definitely would be between Bo Nix and Cooper Rush, so go with Bo Nix on that one. Although, again, if you're in a deeper league, or especially in Superflex, I'm loving what Cooper Rush has given us from a fantasy perspective. This matchup right here, oh my gosh. I can't wait to see what, I play a lot of DFS. I can't wait to see what the projected ownership percentages are on Cooper Rush this week, because Cooper Rush to CD, God, I hope that is not aggressively played because I'm going to play that. Yes, I will. As long as the ownership is not stupid. Penix looked good at Washington. Yep. Love him as a player. Broncos defense or Colts defense? On that one, it is the Broncos defense for me. Colts defense, I do like this week. It's a top 12 defense for sure. Mason Rudolph can provide interceptions for sure. I think I was that is another one that I'm writing about in my article, if you're kind of curious on that one. That article will be out tomorrow. I am writing about the Indianapolis defense and the potential upside that they have this week. Top 10 lock for sure for them, just because Mason Rudolph has been decent in terms of turnovers right there. So Indianapolis's defense as a streaming option, very intriguing this week. Russ, May, or Penix? Oh, it's May for me. Russ, again, unfortunately, when we have no George Pickens, it's just a no-go, unfortunately. Where do I have Russ ranked right now? Russ for me is, oh, let me adjust that because that shouldn't be like that. Russ for me is QB 23. Drake May would be above him. And then Penix right now, I'm just taking it very cautious with him. He's low end QB1. If you have to do it, I understand it, but I just want to give it a week. It's a good matchup here for him, but still, first matchup, first game, you just kind of get those jitters out and whatnot. So I would just prefer to go with May. I'm monitoring Buffalo's defense because while they have been in the past a complete no-go against the pass, they've been getting lit up recently. So I could see Drake May going out there and just going ham on volume and getting some touchdowns, especially if they're chasing points, because I would expect Josh Allen to absolutely tear up their defense. Goff or Baker? When we're looking at Goff or Baker, I'm 99. Let me check real quick. I'm 99% sure it's Baker for me. Yeah. Baker for me by 4 spots. Baker is my QB 6 and Goff is my QB 10. Again, Goff on this one, just matchup history makes me a wee bit uncomfortable on this one. This reads as a situation where, now granted, because we don't have David, I will add this caveat here. Sorry, I will add this caveat here. So when we're looking at Jared Goff and the matchup that he had a couple of weeks ago against Chicago, it was a fine performance from him and not major issues there, but he only threw 1 touchdown, was QB 18. And that is because when you're looking at Chicago's defense, although they can be attacked through the air, it's easiest to attack them on the ground. So it just makes a lot of sense that volume would just be low for Jared Goff. And obviously from a fantasy perspective, he needs volume because he doesn't run. The only caveat I will add, they might have to pass more in this matchup because Dan Campbell has been very adamant that they trust Gibbs for sure, but they don't want to overload him, which makes sense because they're locked for the playoffs. And potentially not having David Montgomery. Do you really want to use up all your Jahmyr Gibbs juice right now? Probably not. So I wouldn't be shocked if they did increase pass volume a little bit here. So Goff is not a complete fade for me this week based off of David Montgomery being out. But this really does read as a much heavier run day for them. So Baker was the answer on that one. Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, or Terry McLaurin. It is Terry McLaurin on that one. Debating between Penix over Murray and Nix. I get it because it's a good matchup for sure, right? And the weapons are insane. We talked about it earlier on a little bit, and just in terms of the situation that Penix is stepping into. But in his first start, I just can't go over either Murray or Nix. This one I look at, and it's frustrating to try and predict those Kyler Murray games. And this could very well be just the James Conner show. I hope it's the James Conner show because from a fantasy perspective, that would be very beneficial. But I do think that this is a potential bounce back situation for Kyler Murray. It just makes me slightly uncomfortable here with him. I have Kyler Murray higher just because the upside and the matchup is a lot better than Bo Nix. But I completely understand if you want to go the other direction. I would not go with Penix. And it's not a negative towards him. It's just a philosophy that I don't know if I want to do the rookie or start the rookie right off the bat there. Will Philly lock Washington again? No, I think we're going to see a better performance from Jane Daniels. Better back and forth. It was such a weird game, right? Again, I've talked about this before, that I just think that was a game where Daniels was a little bit uncomfortable. I expect a better performance from him on this one. So I'm still on him as a top 10 quarterback this week. So Philly, I would expect the same kind of philosophy from them. They were very run heavy last time with Saquon, but an improvement on the Washington side in terms of our fantasy production. Reed or Odunze, I would go with Reed over Odunze. Pick 2 between Ladd, DK, and Devontae Smith. I would go with Devontae Smith and DK on that one. Again, on Ladd, while I love Ladd, unfortunately, it's just a matchup situation. Last time he played Denver, and granted, he's further along in his rookie season, so there could be some uptick there for sure. But given the matchup there and what we know about that Denver secondary, it's just a genuine no-go for me. I try to avoid it if I can, unless it's an absolute superstar. And while I love Ladd McConkey, I don't want to risk it with him in this matchup, unfortunately. Kendre Miller or Alexander Mattison? Kendre Miller for sure over Alexander Mattison. And quite frankly, my fear with Alexander Mattison is to an extreme level, just perspective wise. If you've got a Kendre Miller, I could still play him even if Alvin Kamara was active over a guy like Alexander Mattison. And the reasoning for that, in terms of comfort level, is just that why go with Mattison? Because the ceiling is just so incredibly low, right? Take a swing, and what you can get out of a Kendre Miller working in support of an injured Alvin Kamara is probably going to be the same general production. Maybe even a Tajay Spears. Like if you've got those potential low end, like backup running backs that could be added in terms of a little bit more workload because the RB1 is injured or a committee back, I lean that direction over taking that risk with Alexander Mattison. He can prove me wrong all he wants. That would be fantastic. The ceiling is just not there for me, unfortunately. DK or Terry McLaurin? I would go with Terry McLaurin. DK, unfortunately, man. Oh my God. And that's another one that I'm writing about. You guys are, that's good. I'm tapping into the right people. If those are the ones that I'm focusing on in my article. DK, unfortunately, has just taken a clear backseat to JSN as the wide receiver one. It's so, and I hate that for him, unfortunately, because he's, obviously a very talented receiver, but we saw the awakening of JSN, and it doesn't look like it's going back. There's just a clear change in offensive philosophy. And the problem is, because we've seen from the Seattle offense in the past that two wide receivers can be supported, but we got to remember that this is a new coaching staff, a new offense, new philosophy. And on top of that, Geno just isn't throwing for volume in the way that he has in the past, where he was able to support both DK and Tyler Lockett. It's a different situation now, and the volume isn't enough to make both fantasy relevant there. And I just trust JSN at this point more than DK. So DK moves into that borderline wide receiver 2. Honestly, quite more so in that wide receiver flex territory for me. I feel uncomfortable with it. We're closing out towards the end of the show. I have a couple more running backs that I want to talk about. I've mentioned Tajay Spears a couple times here, and that's one that I want you guys to key in on because I haven't seen the name pop up a lot. He's coming off of that massive performance right that was extremely bolstered by his receiving work in that game. There was not a lot on the ground, but the receptions were truly there for him. You guys remember the game? He had that he had the goal line touch where he essentially tried to jump over, was stopped, and then just kind of reached out over and was being carried by the pile. It was so cool. But I wanted to point that goal line touch out in particular because it's very important to note that his touchdown did not come when Tony Pollard was injured. The touchdown came when Tony Pollard was healthy, and they were just simply rotating and doing kind of like a change of pace, switching up series kind of situation. And that's important for us to note because if there's the potential of us seeing Tajay Spears, like maybe a little bit of a preview of Tajay Spears having enough trust within the coaching staff there to have a meaningful workload alongside Tony Pollard. And we've kind of seen it jostle back and forth there. But with Mason Rudolph coming in, maybe the offense operating like slightly more competently, I think we could see a potential where Tajay Spears is a guy that we should not expect the level of performance that he had last week. But if you're in a dire situation with running back injuries and whatnot, and you're looking and saying, do I have to turn to an Alexander Mattison? You could turn to a Tajay Spears. You could. And Tony Pollard is dealing with an injury, so that's something for us to monitor as well. If he were out, Tajay Spears would be an absolute strong play, a minimum of a flex for us for sure. All right. Moving on to, especially given the matchup as well. And then let's talk about one more. I'm going to slide one more running back in here and talk about Chase Brown. Chase Brown here. I'm seeing a lack of Chase Brown questions. Thank God, because prior to this week, and I appreciate you guys are not asking those. Prior to last week, when I would do my lives, we get so many Chase Brown questions. And I feel like it's time for, and I hope everyone's on board. We are accepting Chase Brown into our life as a clear RB1. It is unquestioned. We start him. We don't ask it, right? He is a must start at this point. He has been a top 12 back every single week since week 8. And I love talking about him because he's the win beneath my fantasy wing, because he is rostered on way too many teams and it is literally carrying us forward here. But when you look at Chase Brown in this offense and the usage for him, there is literally no way that he can be scripted out of a game, even if it's a bad matchup on the ground. And this week is a bad matchup on the ground. So I'm surprised we're not getting more questions on that one, just because it's not an excellent matchup here. But he is matchup proof. Because of the level of trust they have with him in the receiving game. Nobody else is touching the ball. That's it. And he's not out there just catching check downs and getting a couple of receptions for, 4 receptions for 20 yards or something like that. No. They're sending this man downfield, Alvin Kamara style. Chase Brown is out and utilized all over the field. Literally a strong 3-down back in a way that just puts him in the top upper echelon right now. This is one that I am so excited to watch for 2025, right? Because he is in contract with Cincinnati and Zach Moss will still be there, right? But I don't think you can put this genie back in the bottle, right? I anticipate that he will be the RB1 moving forward. It'll be interesting to see how bullish people are on him, or if they don't believe in it. Maybe he takes kind of like a Kyren Williams script where people are worried about him not being the RB1, and it can help out, in terms of being able to draft him a little bit on that one. Because otherwise, the level of production that he's putting out there is going to boost him up into at least a round 2 pick there. But Chase Brown, one to watch 100%, because I really do like him on that potential Kyren Williams track for sure. Let's answer a few more questions before we head out here. Steelers defense or Broncos defense? It is Broncos defense for me. Falcons defense or Texans defense? I think that's Texans defense for me. I'm sorry, I think it's Falcons defense for me, but let me double check. It is indeed the Falcons defense for me on that one. Murray or Goff? We're going with Murray, DJ Moore, or Keenan Allen. That is a really good question right there. It's DJ Moore that we got to go with. It's weird because the target share is just so incredible for Keenan Allen, and they're trying to integrate DJ Moore. It makes sense because they don't have that secondary option in Roschon Johnson. Now, granted, maybe Roschon comes back this week, and that's kind of a moot point. But the utilization of DJ Moore on the ground has been interesting as well. Even though it hasn't popped from a fantasy perspective, it does kind of put that added wrinkle in there for me. But this last matchup that they had a couple of weeks ago with Detroit, he was a top 10 receiver as well. So you can't go wrong with either one of them. But my trust is put a little bit more in DJ Moore on that one. Torn between Jerry Jeudy and Rachaad White and flex. On that one, I am going Rachaad White, and I hate that for sure. But unfortunately, again, I talked about it earlier in the show, DTR makes me so uncomfortable in the context of this offense with the receiving core, unfortunately. Makes me frustrated, but it is what it is what it is for sure. Pick 2, flex, full PPR, Neighbors, Flowers, McMillan, or BTJ. It's Neighbors and BTJ for me. Full PPR does make it interesting for Zay Flowers, though, but Flowers feels a little bit risky for me this week. In terms of volume, a little bit uncomfortable. I think the targets will be there, but maybe not doing a ton with them, unfortunately. I think I was just looking at his statistics from the last matchup there, since we're at that time period where, let me see, where is Zay Flowers? Zay Flowers, Pittsburgh. He is wide receiver 27 for me right now. And his last performance against Pittsburgh back in week 11 was 11 fantasy points. He got the touchdown. He only caught 2 of his 6 targets, 39 yards. The yardage is a major concern for me. When we're looking at Zay Flowers, it has been, good Lord, it's been well over a month since we last saw him finish as higher than a wide receiver 3. So unfortunately there, just feeling a little bit uncomfortable with Zay on that one. Ugh, hate that. But yeah, I would not lean Zay's direction on that one. It would be Neighbors and BTJ for me. And not to disregard McMillan again. I love the progression that he has made. I wish there was a time for me to answer Jalen McMillan, because we're at least getting a combination here. He's got the touchdown streak. We're getting a little bit more in terms of targets. Yardage is okay, right? But again, Dallas's defense, not the most ideal matchup for me. It'll be interesting to see, but I don't know if I trust it to that level yet. More of a flex play for me. And the other guys are just more wide receiver 2 locks for me, for sure. A couple more questions here. Tua or Richardson. This one is interesting because I was shocked and appalled by Tua's performance last week. I don't mean to put it that dramatically, but that was not okay, right? In a matchup where like Houston's defense, I understand they've been pulling it together for sure, but man, Mac Jones lit up that defense the previous week. 7 fantasy points out of Tua is abysmal and appalling, and I just don't understand it coming off of the performances that he had. It just didn't make any sense whatsoever. And now we get San Francisco, and it's interesting because we've got San Francisco dealing with injuries, and then obviously the drama as well. So the injuries are something that could make it a little bit easier of a matchup. But I'm almost willing to risk it with Anthony Richardson over Tua if you're a gambler on that one. The safer option is Tua for sure. It is. But if you need to risk it. Let's say that you're the last seed in and you won last week and you're facing the highest ranked, and I'm in this situation this week, you're facing the, point leader and it's a tough matchup and you need to take that upside swing, then I could go with Richardson, but Tua is definitely the safer option here. Is Derrick Henry going to get stopped again? Nah, not stopped. I have moved him like back a tiny bit. When I say a tiny bit, it just means like he's not a top 3 running back on that one. I anticipate this will be another very close, traditional AFC North matchup here where we're getting this kind of grinded out situation and we need a touchdown from Derrick Henry to have a strong day. So no, I think we'll get a nice bounce back week from him. He had a decent performance last week or last time against Pittsburgh, and we pull up the stats real quick on that one. And yeah, it's exactly what I said. Close scoring, low volume. He had 13 carries, 65 yards, got the touchdown to save the day. Was RB 22. So a low end RB2 on that one. So he's still in play. Upside is a little bit limited here, but just enough for us to not panic over him. We're still starting him. Do I start Mayfield or Murray? I do have Murray ranked higher, and that one's the question that drives me the craziest, but it is Murray that we're going with. And then I'm going to close out this one because I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I just want to close out with this one on this one because it is very important with Kendre Miller. Do I start Kendre Miller over Alexander Mattison when I have Alvin Kamara? So let's say that Alvin Kamara is out. You are starting Kendre Miller over Alexander Mattison, no question. Let's say that, and I don't know if this is an either or, but if you're in a situation where you're looking at having to put Alexander Mattison next to Alvin Kamara, low key, I might still put in Kendre Miller over him. Again, on that one, Mattison, I don't feel comfortable with it. He's in a range where I trust, let me see where I have it right now. He's in a range for me where I feel more comfortable with backup running backs. And hey, here's one. Jalen McMillan is out. I have not felt comfortable with the Denver backfield all season long. I've been super vocal about that. But the fact that McMillan is out, I could turn to even a Javonte Williams clearly over Alexander Mattison. I could turn to a Kenneth Gainwell over Alexander Mattison. I could turn to a Braylon Allen over Alexander Mattison. There's just so many different directions that you can go. when you consider the true lack of upside that he offers. You know, you don't have the prospect of getting an RB1 finish. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. So even though the matchup with Jacksonville is interesting, I just feel super uncomfortable with it. Couple more questions here to close things up. Would you start Tucker Kraft, Pat Freiermuth, Brenton Strange, or Cade Otton? It's Tucker for me, and oddly enough, these guys are all ranked back to back to back to back for me. Well, let me not say that. Cade Otton might be the outlier there. But the first three are ranked back to back for me. Literally in that order. Yeah, the gap is with Cade. So it's Tucker Kraft that I would go with. I have Tucker Kraft the highest ranked out of those guys, then Pat Freiermuth, then Brenton Strange. McMillan, Odunze, or Coker, half PPR. Thanks for your help. Honestly, it's between McMillan and Odunze on that one. I lean towards Odunze just because of the potential for an aggressive volume push for Caleb Williams, but it's very close between him and McMillan. And then, okay, no, we got it all. That's perfect. I just wanted to make sure I closed out the last one on that. I appreciate you all tuning in. These are fantastic questions. I know I did not get to them all. So if I missed any of them and you're watching on Twitter, be sure to tag me in at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME, and I can answer it there. If I miss it on TikTok, just drop your question in my latest YouTube video and I can get, in my latest TikTok video, and I can get to it there. But otherwise, I appreciate you all tuning in and sticking around and having fun in the chat. Thank you so much, guys. Again, remember, this is a podcast, a live podcast. So if you are not already subscribed to the podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy podcast, please make sure that you're subscribed to it on all platforms. Podcast goes on as the season goes on and into the off season as well. And I appreciate the love that you show me. And if you're in the mood for any other subscriptions, you can subscribe to me on YouTube or follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places at It's Tera Time as well. One single branding just to make everything nice, neat, and clean. Other than that, good luck with your fantasy lineups. I sincerely hope that all of you win your fantasy matchups this week and that we are all in the championship in multiple leagues. We're just thriving and we're out there killing it. And you're all back here next week asking me your championship questions to take home that victory. That is my ideal situation for all of you. Appreciate you all tuning in. I will be back here. Oh my gosh. Actually, I will not be back here next week. Hold up. We're going to follow me on Twitter because I just remembered off the top of my head next week is Christmas. So I won't be back on Wednesday. We'll figure it out. I assume that we will not be here on Wednesday. So follow me on Twitter and I'll get you guys a scheduling change. It'll either be Tuesday or Thursday. I'm not sure which one, but we'll be back here sometime. We'll be back here sometime next week. All right. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Good luck with your lineups. I will talk to you again next week. Thank you for tuning in.